So Cheltenham is just around the corner, and of course I'm looking forward to it. Always do well at Cheltenham. But this year I've managed to profit even before Cheltenham has started, thanks to the unique circumstances surrounding this meeting. So let's have a look at that in this video. If you're interested in learning to trade on Betfair, then visit the BetAngel Academy, where you have detailed, structured Betfair trading courses. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon if you want notification of new videos as they're released. So Cheltenham has come back round again. Cheltenham 2020 is here, or almost here, and I love Cheltenham simply because it's the chance for me to really put decent sums of money through the market. As I've mentioned in other videos, the market in itself over 4 days will turn over probably about 150 million, and the average of each race will be about £4 to £5 million. And the bigger races, if the circumstances are correct, could turn over 10 million or more. So it always gets my attention. It's one of the big meetings that I love, always slightly apprehensive heading into it, but I generally produce a pretty good result. And last year I produced a very good result over the course of the meeting. Did pretty well all the way through there, and then had a really good day on Gold Cup Day, which would be the last day, the Friday, at Cheltenham. I managed last year finally to break the £1,000 barrier on the Gold Cup. For some reason, I tend to pull in fairly consistent results at Cheltenham, but I never ever managed to get above £1,000, and I finally did it last year. So it was a real moment for me last year to be able to achieve that. Gold Cup Day went okay, predominantly because of the Gold Cup market, and I was a little bit inconsistent towards the end, but by then I'd done most of what I was going to do anyway, and it all went pretty well. So I'm always, grateful for that. I never assume anything in the run up to a meeting, and I research and detail all of my knowledge and look at all of my prior notes to be as well prepared as possible, but you never quite know what's coming around the corner. And if you're interested in all of the detail that goes behind Cheltenham, I have discussed it before, and if you want to look at previous trading videos around Cheltenham, data, information, knowledge, all of those things, I've covered it over many, many years, and you should go to the Academy, where we have grouped all of those videos together and put some extra videos on there that you won't find on YouTube, where you can actually learn all about how Cheltenham works, look at some markets, understand everything that happens within it, because it does feel very different. And if you don't get on with the Cheltenham markets, it's not really an issue, because 99.9%, I've never worked out what the stat is, but it's very high, of markets will not be like Cheltenham or like these big meetings. Most of the day-to-day stuff that you see basically performs in a certain way, and it's very different from what you'll expect to see at Cheltenham. So if you don't get on with Cheltenham, it's not a major issue. But however, this is an opportunity for me to use a slightly bigger bank and to really go for it. And I love really throwing everything at Cheltenham to see what I could possibly do. So it's a big opportunity for me, can influence how I perform over the course of the year. And it's certainly the biggest chunk that you take out of the month of March. So yeah, it's worth doing that. But I never go into the meeting assuming that I know how it's going to trade. I'll look at prior notes, but you can't, as a trader, believe that just because you did well last year, you can do well the other year. I've seen so many people lose their edge over time, and it's because they failed to adapt. So I'm always on the outlook for what has changed in prior years and how it's changing this year. So you'll get the chance to do that on the Tuesday, and then hopefully you can sort of build from there. If you're an active trader, you'll be able to understand how the market works and build from it. And I'll be doing exactly the same, because you just don't know what the market's going to throw at you. And we've had a great example of that year because of COVID-19, the coronavirus, as it's colloquially called now. Now, it's important to understand that coronaviruses have been around for a long time, and what we're seeing now is actually a mutation of that, a new strain. And as a consequence, that's why there's a lot of fuss about it, because everybody's been getting colds and coughs and man flu for millennia. But this is something that's slightly different, and that's why everybody's on tenterhooks, basically trying to understand exactly what's going on. And until they can sequence and come up with vaccines and really understand the nature of this virus, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty out there. And that uncertainty is spilt over to the Cheltenham Festival. And, one of the biggest markets that we're going to see at Cheltenham is probably going to be the Will Racing Go Ahead market. And, you know, you may think that this is an unusual market, but in fact, it's been pretty common over the years. So typically during the jump season, when we get wind, rain, snow, anything the world decides to throw at us, you typically do get a Will Racing Go Ahead market. So it's not unique to Cheltenham. It's something that you frequently see across a range of individual markets over the course of the winter in the UK, and sometimes even in the summer. So that's not the unique aspect of it, but obviously the circumstances surrounding it are pretty unique, because the concern being that Cheltenham, being a big event with a large number of people, may come under the auspices of the Department of Health, and therefore they may decide to call it off to limit the spread of the disease. However, when you look across the broad spectrum of sport, you sort of feel that as we move closer to the festival, that becomes less and less likely, unless if there was an explosion in people who were confirmed to actually have the virus. So this brings on necessarily a trading opportunity. And, you know, I will trade anything if there's liquidity in it, and there is liquidity in this market. It's been very high. What I'll do is I'll check the market and we'll pop up what volume there is in this market at this particular moment in time. But for me, this was an obvious trade. And I say obvious because there is publicly available information on this particular market. And also there are a number of factors in there that make it quite, I was looking for the right word there to do. It's easy to frame this particular trade. That's probably what I'm trying to say here. Because when the market opened, it opened at around evens, and it bounced around a little bit throughout the length of the market so far. And it's like if there were no new cases, then the price would gradually come in, and it looked like Cheltenham was going to be more likely. And then the market would spike out when some new cases were announced. But if you actually looked at the press releases on the announcement of those cases, you could see that they were timed at roughly the same amount of time each day. So you would back it with the price expecting to come in a bit, or you would lay it when just ahead of when that announcement was made, and the price would spike out. But typically, the main part of, or the essence of this trade is to do with time decay. If we're 10 days out and the market's priced at evens, we're basically saying that, you know, it starts at twos and that's going to just decline away, and it doesn't go in a linear fashion. It tends to sort of, you know, follow a curve basically to expiry, because it gets much more likely as we get closer to that particular day. So it was obvious to me that there were several elements to this trade, and that in fact backing for the meeting to go ahead was probably the most logical thing to do, because each day that passed, then you would get a chunk of value purely down to the amount of time left for the festival to go ahead. So it just made perfect sense for me to back this and wait for the price to start coming in. But you know, there are other factors within here as well. The number of cases that were coming up were relatively small. So if you think about the number of cases in a population of 60 million people, plus Ireland, because obviously there are going to be loads of Irish people coming over as well to the Cheltenham Festival, well, and other nationalities. I'm just looking at the two broad bases here. Let's not exclude anybody. But, you know, obviously all of those people getting together would probably create an issue for the spread of the virus. However, if you think about it, you know, we had the League Cup last weekend. There were 90,000 people at Wembley, some of them from Manchester, and that was where one of the cases were. And they did not, you know, say, oh, we're thinking about stopping the League Cup. So when you take all of those things into account, you have to look at it and you have to sort of say, well, you know, what would cause Cheltenham to be cancelled or postponed? And that would be like a surge in the number of cases that were being reported. And the fact is that hasn't happened. Now, near to me, we've actually got 2 cases, you know, not that far away. So, you know, I went to a dinner party at the weekend, and obviously that was the number one discussion, really, and all of the rumours and everything swirling around. But what you tend to find is that the news and media outlets tend to amplify things, because they want your eyeballs, or they want you to read their papers, so they're always going to have sensationalist headlines. You've got to come to terms with that. Whatever you're researching, whatever you're doing, their incentive is not to give you the correct information, it's to get you to read their media. And social media, as you know, is a law unto itself, and you can't really trust anything on social media. You have to take it with a pinch of salt. But however, I've been following virologists who are independent of any media organisations, and they tend to give you a fair and balanced view and refer you to other papers. So I have been quite interested in the whole thing, because I was interested in what do they know about it, what do they think about how it's spreading, what are the real numbers, but also will it follow the normal flu season cycle? Because that was the other thing that was going off in the back of my mind as well, is that obviously the flu season follows a defined pattern, and as the further we head into that pattern, is it going to be following that same pattern as well? Now, from the academic circles, they were sort of saying, well, we don't know, it's a new strain of the virus, but you sort of believe or feel that maybe it should be following that cycle. But obviously there's no evidence as such to confirm that at this moment in time. And that ushers in another point for you here. So governments, officials, people who are responsible for public health are always going to give you a worst case scenario, because when they have to make a decision, large organizations, especially public ones, or, that are in public service, are built for continuity, not for taking risks. So they will try and minimize the risks as much as possible. So everything that you will see will be geared up to that. They will not want to take any risks, because they don't sort of want that to be on their hands, which is quite appropriate when we're talking about the flu. But can you see what I'm talking about here? The difference between reality and what you see and hear is often detached. And this goes on, this game goes on in everything that I read: research reports, manager news conferences, public announcements. All of these things will tell you stuff, but you're more interested in stuff that you're not being told, and more of the detail behind there. You have to think about what people are thinking about and why they're saying things to really get to the underlying reality of any situation. And I'm saying this from a broad basis, but I am using it in this particular scenario to try and understand, what people would say and why. So yeah, my judgment call on this was a certain amount of value within the market. Some of that value is going to be removed by time decay. I need to be on the right side of that, but I also need to make a judgment on whether we think things are going to get much worse. So my judgment was that, it is going to progress, obviously, but it probably isn't quite as bad as people have initially made out. Certainly not in the short term. So it was quite an obvious trade for me in terms of what I had to do. And I was trading actively in and out of the market. And I went into one account and started actively getting involved before I realized I didn't really have enough money within that account. So what I actually did was I ended up switching to another account and using more money to be able to do this trade. But I'll bring up the screenshots for you to show the initial position and where the smaller amount is, because this will be more realistic to a risk that you'll be willing to take. But using a relatively small amount of money, I've made a half decent return. My biggest risk at any one particular point within this market was about £500, and you can see the return that we've got from there. Now, like I said, I have used more money on a separate account where I had more money available, but the screenshots and the images that I'm showing you here are more relatable to the sort of thing that you would probably choose to do if you chose to do it. Now, it's quite likely that this opportunity is over for Cheltenham, because the price is very short now, and it does look like there's nothing that's going to stop it from going ahead. So therefore, I would probably say there is no position for you to take currently within this market. This is here purely for educational purposes. However, if there was a sudden spike in the number of cases that we saw reported in a number of locations, then it may be a lay opportunity. However, I think it's too late now for Cheltenham not to go ahead. And also, you've got the Manchester Derby taking place this weekend, and there's not even a hint that that is going to be postponed, cancelled, or played behind closed doors. So as a consequence, I think that Cheltenham is pretty safe at this moment in time. However, it's inevitable that we're going to start asking questions about other sports events. And 2020 should be a big year for me, or an up year. So we have the sports cycle that rises and falls depending upon events that are taking place. We're in an up year this year because we've got Euro 2020. I think that is probably the thing that may suffer the most, depending upon the number of cases that go around and whether we see evidence that COVID-19 is following the normal flu season. But also, we have the Olympics and other events that are likely to take place that could be affected. So I think that these markets are going to be very active, and we're going to see a lot of interest and activity in these markets as we head through the year. So for me, Cheltenham is done and dusted. My trade is pretty much complete there. It's sort of ironic, it's weird to actually have a really good trade before Cheltenham has even started. So it's going to be a good Cheltenham this year, unless if I really mess up the festival. But I think our attention should now turn, if you're looking at this type of trade or you're thinking about how things are going to pan out, to look at perhaps some of these other markets. Some of these other markets do exist and are tradable, and if they're not there now, they probably will be at some point in the future. And I think that's the next thing that we have to look for in terms of how this is going to affect sport throughout the rest of the year. I sincerely hope that it doesn't, for a number of reasons. You don't want loads of people to get ill, and it's inevitable that your family or friends will begin to get affected as well. But obviously it would be a bit of a downer on the year as well, and the economy and all of the other associated things. I don't need to explain that to you really. But my hope is that maybe the typical flu season kicks in, it reduces its potency, and then the scientists and everybody working to combat it will get a little bit more time to be able to do what they need to do before the flu season returns later in the year. So yeah, fingers crossed that everything goes okay with that. Fingers crossed that everything goes well with Cheltenham. I hope you have a great Cheltenham. And like I said at the start of this video, there are loads of videos and data and information, way more than I've done for other meetings, that are available if you go and visit the Academy. You'll get loads of insight there as to how Cheltenham is likely to trade. And that's probably the best advice that you'll be able to get in terms of how those markets are likely to play out. So best of luck, whatever you're doing, and hope that things begin to brighten up a little bit on the horizon in the near future. But yeah, best of luck at Cheltenham 2020.